Hello, and welcome to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit.
Hey, podcast listeners. This is our last episode of 2023, and I have an exciting trend to share with you. See, it's that time of year again, where we're all focused on new beginnings and upcoming trends, brimming with hope that there's some groundbreaking tactic, tool, or trick on the horizon that's going to make the next year even better. And I think I have that hack, that trick, that trend for you to pay attention to. See, my friend Nicole Nidea, program director at Soda International, has already been implementing this throughout 2023, and she joins us today on the podcast to talk about it. The trend that you're all looking for? Findability as a core fundraising strategy. What does that mean? Because we're all already doing brand awareness, but it's more than that. We're talking AI-assisted search, long game scaling strategies, and social mixing tactics that target specific audiences. For example, Nicole talks about how using specialized SEO has made her a champion of integrating awareness as a goal in every aspect of fundraising. And increasing that awareness, or findability, allows Soda International staff and volunteers to focus their energy on things that really matter. While Nicole brings to life a wonderland of awareness, that's not all she shines a light on. Listen in to hear all about Soda's scale and scope, partnerships and peer-to-peer fundraising, and findability as a core fundraising strategy.
It is your number one priority to ensure that your business can continue to deliver on its mission, whether it's this year, next year, and beyond.
So we're creating this inclusive environment, building between diverse communities to ensure that our young people can thrive.
I'm always so baffled when I do webinars. There's always somebody at the end who raises their hand and says, I'm the development director. Should I have access to the budget? I'm always like, yes, you've got to know that.
The best thing you can ever do as a nonprofit leader is spend as much money as possible on your story.
Then you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
That is unacceptable, and that is not the way to run a board.
The best thing that we can do is just raise as much money as possible and then give it to the people around the world.
If you're going to be sustainable, you have to have a multi-channel strategy to reach all of these different generations of donors however they want to be reached.
One of the principal values that we carry as an organization is to lift grace over guilt. And we believe that grace is the greatest agent for change that anyone can ever experience.
We all need each other in terms of other nonprofits working together to solve things.
The more nonprofits can give their donor base that experience of the impact that's being made on the ground level, there's nothing else that you have to give someone. This is Nonstop Nonprofit.
Thank you for joining me today as I jump into a conversation with my new friend, Nicole Nidea. She is the director of program at Soda, and she's coming here today to share her wealth of knowledge in fundraising, delivering programs, growing organically. I'm really excited about today's conversation. Nicole, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here today, David. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Me too. Well, Nicole, can you tell us how you got started in the nonprofit world?
Yeah, of course. I truly believe my nonprofit journey begins with Soda in 2015. In 2015, I was a first-year student at Washington University in St. Louis, and at the time, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. So I was really excited to see that the first ever Soda chapter was hosting a tour of our local organ procurement organization, Surgical Suite. At the time, I didn't know that the event was going to be about organ donation. I didn't know much about organ donation, but at that event, I met Soda's founder, Sarah, and Sarah's sister was an organ donor. Once I learned more about Sarah's sister, Laura, and organ donation, I became an organ donation advocate. So I helped Sarah lead that original Soda chapter at Washington University in St. Louis until I graduated. But before I graduated, I started an internship at a local nonprofit here in St. Louis. And I felt really well prepared for that internship because I practiced a lot of skills that I used at that internship throughout my time as a Soda chapter leader. So I did things like build partnerships or marketed programs or led a team. So I was, like I said, really well prepared for that internship. And that internship actually turned into a part-time job and then a full-time job. Once I graduated, I moved from intern to admin assistant to development and marketing coordinator. But I remember sitting in my first staff meeting and saying, this feels like Soda. And I was really lucky because that organization invested in me. They put me through a 5-day course all about fundraising, and I was really eager to apply that knowledge to my role, but it was a little bit hard because I was a coordinator and my development manager and executive director were the ones strategizing and planning and leading relationships. So I reached back out to Sarah. And Sarah at the time was leading the national nonprofit that Soda is today, but they just became an official nonprofit in 2020. And so her and I worked together to build that fundraising program from the bottom up back in 2020. And then we raised enough funds to hire on the first ever full-time employee, which ended up being me. I became Soda's program director in April of 2021. So that's a little synopsis of my nonprofit journey so far.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that background, Nicole. It's interesting to hear how many different people find their way to the nonprofit sphere in different ways. Like I myself, I finished college and fundraising just kind of fell into my lap, and I realized I loved it and built a career around it, and now get to sit here today with my friends at Fundraise and talk all about fundraising and nonprofit leadership and management and do fun things like this where I get to meet people like you, have really interesting conversations about being in the nonprofit world. So Nicole, as I was preparing for our conversation today, one of the things I thought was really interesting about Soda is you do a lot of work with students. I believe you call them ambassadors, right? Student ambassadors?
Student leaders, ambassadors,
Student leaders, ambassadors. Yeah. So, but it's all about activating students to tell the stories on behalf of your organization. So I thought that would be a really interesting place to dive in because there's such a big conversation in the nonprofit world today about reaching the next generation. And it almost seems like an organic part of Soda's growth. Can you talk to me about that a little?
Yeah, of course. We are totally bought into supporting the next generation of student leaders because that's really what we do. Our mission is to inspire and support student-led organ donation advocacy on high school, college, and graduate school campuses. What that means in practice is we have about 60 chapters on campuses across the country that save lives through organ donation advocacy. And SODA, our national organization, provides those students with free resources so that advocacy is easy and fast for them.
That's awesome. So I think a lot of our listeners are going to be really interested in this because everyone is asking me and all the conversations I have is like, how do we activate the next generation? How do we get engaged with the next generation? And Soda is doing it naturally. What is it that has helped you reach students and reach the next generation of supporters so naturally?
There are 3 ways that students usually find out about SODA, and that is organ procurement organizations, word of mouth, and online. I already mentioned organ procurement organizations, but they're also called OPOs in the organ donation world. What OPOs do is they coordinate transplants. But in addition to coordinating transplants, they're out there advocating for organ, eye, and tissue donation in their communities, which also means reaching students. They'll often go into health classes or driver's ed classes and educate students about becoming an organ donor before they receive their license. And they share SODA and our mission at those presentations as a way for students to stay involved with organ, eye, and tissue donation and save lives on their own. The second way is through word of mouth. So an adult can encourage their children to start a SODA chapter, or a friend can encourage a friend to start a SODA chapter. A great example of this is our chapter at Meredith College. In high school, the founders of our Meredith College chapter was friends with our founder of our George Mason University chapter. So once they saw Maddie at George Mason University doing amazing things and saving lives, they wanted to start their own SODA chapter. And like I said, the last way that students usually find us is online. So our organization invests a lot of time in making sure that we're visible. We post on social media a lot because that's where students are. Students love Instagram and TikTok, so we post frequently on social media and students find us there. But we also make sure that we're found easily through Google search. We utilize SEO and make sure our website is thorough, and we have frequent blogs so that if students searches something like organ donation advocacy or organ donation high school, SODA is at the top of their search results and they can get involved really easily with us.
That's really interesting. And so much of that has to do with staying up to date on trends. So my next question is for you is, how do you stay up to date on trends and stay so relevant on the near speed of light changes that happen specifically on social channels like TikTok, but also the mundane things of SEO. I know our listeners are going to be like, well, that's great, Nicole, but I can't stay up to date on all of these things. Like, I'm going to assume that you don't have, an army of people behind you to do this research. So what is it? How do you stay up to date?
I think the magic behind Soda and what we do is that it's really easy to replicate, especially for a small team, because we're a small team. It's just me who's full-time and then our engagement manager, Sophia. But we leverage either easy adoption of these types of techniques or we rely on help. So in terms of social media trends, we have an intern who's in college that creates TikTok videos for us because she really knows what's best in terms of what's hot on TikTok and what type of trends to get involved with. But in terms of SEO, I and the rest of our team helps implement that. And I am by no means an expert in marketing. We just take a really easy approach by saying, hey, what would a student be searching if they're trying to find us? They might try to search Oregon Donation. They might try to search Oregon Donation College. And then we try to replicate those types of searches and boost our SEO ratings by just taking those phrases and using them a lot on our website or on our blog. So it's really simple. Not a lot of research goes behind it, but we do track our SEO efforts and we see boosts in key search terms. So even though we don't do research behind what terms we use, it's working because our students are reporting that they found us on Google or we see those boosts in certain rankings.
Well, I mean, first of all, congrats, because that's not easy work to do. And the fact that you're doing it all in-house is very impressive. So pass on my support to the rest of the team, because I know there's a lot of effort that goes in behind it. And as I'm hearing you talk about it, one of the things I hear is the passion behind activating students for the cause. And I'm sure it's near and dear to your heart because you were part of starting one of the first chapters, right? And as you're talking, I'm hearing so many connections to what one of our co-founders, Justin, when he talks about an organization he worked with called Invisible Children. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm going to age myself here a little bit, but when I was graduating high school and going into college, Invisible Children was doing a huge push to bring attention to what was happening around a warlord named Coney. And he tells this story of how the average age of their donor was 16 because of the way they activated that up and coming generation. So like these were my peers at the time, right? And that's a wild way to be able to activate because they were active on channels like Facebook and Instagram was just starting, again, aging myself here, but they were active and relevant and communicating with the next generation of supporters where they are. So with that context, I kind of want to shift a little into thinking about fundraising, because one of the things that helped Invisible Children grow so much is they took on a strategy called peer-to-peer fundraising, which was relatively new at the time. Now it's a tried and true practice. But I'm curious, Nicole, if you guys have dabbled in peer-to-peer fundraising at all, if you've had any success, and what's that like working with supporters and activating students and the next generation of supporter on social channels like TikTok and other organic networks?
Yeah, so at SODA, we actually don't ask our students to fundraise for us ever. We know that fundraising can be scary and not everybody wants to fundraise, so we never require our chapters to fundraise for us, because that goes along with the philosophy that advocacy should be easy for students here at SODA. However, we do utilize peer-to-peer advocacy with adult champions for SODA. Right now, we are doing a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign that's raised over $30,000 in memory of an organ donor. And what we did is we supported a couple who wanted to fundraise for SODA, and we helped them craft an email to send to all their friends and family. And now we are processing the donations and acknowledging donations on our end. But it has been so much more efficient for us to utilize this peer-to-peer fundraising campaign versus me trying to make connections and fundraise over $30,000, because those warm connections and a friend telling a friend to donate to SODA is so much more meaningful than a staff member telling a person to donate to SODA. Yeah,
it's one of my favorite things as a fundraiser when I think about peer-to-peer fundraising is that you basically have a warm introduction to your supporters network at that point. And you're going to reach, you talk a lot about being discovered, right? Through SEO and TikTok and other social channels, but there's no better way to be discovered than a warm introduction. And so much of peer-to-peer is that. It's someone saying, I choose to support Soda because I believe in their cause and I want you to know about it. And that first connection builds so much trust when it's a warm introduction compared to trying to introduce yourself like you're talking about. And so that's why I love peer-to-peer as a strategy, but also why it's so successful. I mean, you talked about the astronomical, you raised $30,000 for this campaign, which is awesome. We did a study right at the end of last year about the value of peer-to-peer, and I was, astounded by the results. But, what we found was the average result of a fundraiser, a peer-to-peer fundraiser. So if I were to do a fundraiser for Soda, the average value is over $1,200 per fundraiser, compared to the average gift online, which is $120, which is still really good, but the average value of a fundraiser is 10 times the value of a gift. And so one of the things I recommend all the time to organizations that I talk to and fundraising leaders that I work with is focus on peer-to-peer, because you're going to 10x your investment. And could you imagine the work it would take to raise $30,000 organically compared to doing that through the warm introductions of this organ donor couple? So I think that's a great way to utilize that fundamental strategy. And now, enjoy this break from your friends at Fundraise, the nonprofit industry's most innovative fundraising platform.
Fundraise provides exceptional, innovative, and friendly fundraising technology focused on nonprofit growth. Made for fundraisers by fundraisers, our state-of-the-art platform integrates every core aspect of front and back-end fundraising management into a convergent platform perfect for nonprofiteers like you. Every day, we celebrate nonprofits like UNHCR and National Wildlife Federation as they trust Fundraise to power fundraising campaigns around the world. Warning, we go through a lot of confetti. Get started raising the funds and the fun at fundraise.org. That's funraise.org.
Now that you've heard how Fundraise can level up your fundraising game, let's get back to the conversation. One of the things is interesting about Soda's model of delivering services and awareness is you're chapter-based, specifically through local grassroots style communication. A lot of organizations that I talk to that have a similar local chapter-based delivery model of their programs, they have to be really intentional with the way they communicate about themselves. Can we spend a couple minutes talking about that side of the way you deliver programs and communications? How do you equip your chapter leaders to speak on behalf of Soda and make sure that the core message is coming through, but also allowing them to speak organically and naturally to where they are and why they advocate for Soda?
Yeah, so I have mentioned that we provide our students with free resources. Those free resources include mentorship, event funding, supplies, how-to guides, and more. I think those resources really unify our chapters because they're all either wearing sort of chapter t-shirts with our logo on it, or they're hosting similar events because we provide them with event ideas. But another really key part of unifying our chapters and making sure that they are accurate when sharing information about organ, eye, and tissue donation is because of our OPO partners. I've mentioned our OPO partners so many times already in this interview because they have played such a key role in our growth and our day-to-day work. Every single Soda chapter works with their OPO, and their OPO provides them with organ donation training through the OPO's existing volunteer training program. And this ensures that all the information that they share on campus is accurate.
That's awesome. And I think it's so interesting, this trend I'm hearing is, as we continue to talk and how you've helped Soda grow, everything comes back to what sounds like a very fundamental commitment to grassroots growth through authenticity and relationships. But along that growth, I'm sure you've had a lot of opportunities to say yes or no to a lot of things. So one of the things that I know fundraisers and nonprofit leaders face every day is decision fatigue. You have so many things you have to do, so many things you have to decide, so many things you have to push forward that by the end of the day, you're exhausted. And it takes a strong commitment to a cause and a North Star to combat that fatigue. So Nicole, can you talk about how as program director at SOTA and other leaders at SOTA, how have you and your team focused on your grassroots growth? What have been some of the exciting things you've been able to say yes to, but also what have been some of the hard things you've had to say no to make sure you stay focused on your cause and delivering the way that you believe is the right way to deliver?
Yeah. So one of the most important things that has helped me make decisions has been having a very focused mission and focused programming. So at SOTA, we know we're really great at supporting students, high school, college, and graduate school students in the U.S. And when we're able to say yes, it means that a partnership aligns with that very focused mission. And when we say no to things, it often means it does not align with that very focused mission. So some examples of this have been international chapters and middle school chapters. A few months ago, I was approached by a Canadian student who wanted to start a Canadian chapter. And even though it would have been really exciting to say we have international chapters, we knew it took us a long time to understand the organ donation system here in the United States, and that it would take a lot of time to understand the Canadian organ donation system and understand how we could best support students there. In terms of middle school chapters, an OPO came to us and said, hey, can we start a chapter at a middle school? Well, it would have been really exciting to say, yeah, we have a way for you to engage younger students. We ended up saying no because our resources are catered to teens and young adults. Middle schoolers are less mature than teens and young adults, so all of our programming materials would have to be revamped for a younger audience. If we were focusing on a younger audience, then we wouldn't be able to focus on our current audience, those high school, college, and graduate school students in the US. So that very focused mission has helped us say no. Also, just knowing it's okay to say no has been really helpful. Our founder instilled a culture of it being okay to say no, and so I try to continue that now that I manage all of our staff and also make big decisions.
I had a conversation one time with a nonprofit executive, and this thought of it being okay to say no stuck with me from that conversation. We were talking, and he said, we had I think he said it was an 8-figure gift, the largest gift the organization had ever potentially received, but it was contingent on them opening up a new program and a new way to deliver it. They had to ultimately come back to the donor and say no, because they didn't know how to deliver services that way. They didn't know if they could deliver services that way. They didn't have the staff, and it wasn't a core part of their mission. And I'm sure, talking with that leader, it was the hardest decision they had ever made as a leadership team. And I'm sure you've had to make a lot of those hard decisions along the way, because no is a really hard word to say, particularly when you're talking about helping people. I guess my where I'm going with this, I have a question, is what would your encouragement be to other nonprofit leaders who are facing a tough no? They know what they're being asked isn't necessarily core to their mission or who they are, but it's also a really attractive offer. Like you said, it would be really cool to say we have chapters internationally, or it'd be great to serve even younger students, but that's not core to who we are. How would you encourage those leaders facing decisions like that?
I would encourage those leaders to keep in mind that no can lead to growth. And like I said, we just said no to international chapters and middle school chapters, but saying no has allowed us to grow new chapters for our existing audience and enhance the resources that we provide them so that saving lives is easier for them. I also find that sometimes when making these tough decisions, it can help to be transparent about why you're saying no. And that can help other people understand why you're making the decision you're making and really be able to see how focused your nonprofit is.
So we've covered quite a bit of ground already. I think it's so cool to hear how SOTA has grown organically through many different channels, how you've been able to build partnerships and grow into this really dynamic leader at an organization that is going through hyper growth, and such valuable words to other leaders who are facing tough decisions, whether to say yes or no to cool opportunities, but maybe not mission focused opportunities. But I wanted to take a little bit stronger of a pivot here away from SOTA and talk a little bit about your career, because Nicole, you've built a really dynamic career already. I know you're still relatively early in your career, but you're doing some phenomenal work with SOTA. You're delivering programs, you're leading fundraising, you're managing staff. This is, most people don't get to be where they're at in your career. And one of the things I've seen you talk a lot about is mentorship and being part of a mentor program. So one of the things that I'm really committed to this season on the Nonstop Nonprofit podcast and just generally is helping other nonprofit leaders and other nonprofit people build a nonprofit career. There's so much from a resource and conversation about building careers in the corporate world or building careers in the agency world, but no one talks about building a nonprofit career, and we should, because it's the most rewarding career to build. So my question to you is, as we start to wind down here, is what has this mentorship been like? How valuable is it? And how do you see yourself paying it forward?
Yeah, so I saw the value of having a mentor really early on in my career. That first organization that I worked at, one of my first mentors actually learned about the organization through her mentor, who was a board member. So after hearing that, I was really eager to find a mentor of my own. So I went to a local professional development group here in St. Louis, and I signed up for their mentorship program. That made it really easy because I didn't have to go out and network and ask the really scary question of, will you be my mentor? One was paired to me. And that mentor was really great because she instilled self-confidence in me when I was just like a year or even less into my career. And she also encouraged me to take on more leadership roles. So a big thank you to Amy for helping me get to where I am today. Amy talked about how she had such a wonderful mentor, and that's why she wanted to be a mentor. So in the future, I definitely want to keep my eye out for opportunities like that, where I can be part of a professional development group and serve as a mentor for a professional who's looking to follow a similar career path to mine.
It's really exciting. I also expect to see a lot of great things for the staff that you're building at SOTA, being able to take advantage of mentorship opportunities like this and having a leader who's committed to not just what they can do for the organization, but to their development as well. So Nicole, as we wind down our time, 2 final questions for you. And I want to ask, what is your number 1 tip for success this giving season?
Unfortunately, I think my tip is not super applicable right now. I think it's something good to keep in mind in January when you begin planning for the following year's end of year giving, because my advice is to begin making moves for end of year giving early, way earlier than you think it's necessary, because a year full of touch points can lead to lots of generosity at year end. One thing that I'm doing right now to increase those touch points for SOTA supporters is transitioning from quarterly updates from me to weekly updates from me. I've been in awe of how many people are clicking on our links and replying to my emails now, and I can't wait to see how that pays off at year end.
That's awesome. Well, Nicole, this has been such a rich conversation, and I'm really excited to continue watching SOTA grow, watch you continue to direct the way that your organization moves and engages the next generation of supporters, all through these, grassroots organic growth efforts. And I'm excited to watch as you start to layer in some of those channels and mediums that allow you to accelerate that growth even faster.
Well, thank you, David. I really appreciate your kind words and encouragement today, but also just for having me on the podcast so we could have this conversation.
Absolutely. If anyone from our audience wants to connect with you any further, where would be the best place for them?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Nicole Nidea. Or if you want to send me an email, you can send me an email at nicole@sotanational.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, Nicole.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit. This podcast is brought to you by your friends at Fundraise, nonprofit fundraising software built for nonprofit people by nonprofit people. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn or text me at 714-717-2474. And don't forget to get your next episode the second it hits the internets. Find us on your favorite podcast streaming service, hit that follow button, and leave us a review to help us reach more nonprofit people like you. See you next time.